People who work in high-class restaurants and hotels. What is the most ridiculous, stereotypical rich person thing you've ever experienced someone has done? My former boss, insanely wealthy, used to stay in presidential suites and would have any and all red removed. He was a high roller at several casinos and they made special chips just for him as a substitute to red chips. He hated the color red because when you're losing money, you're in the red. Oh yay, I love this one. First and foremost, throw a 6-year-old's birthday party at a tapas restaurant called Wine Company. Try to feed them tartar. Scoff when your child asks for balloons or french fries. Try to feed them jalapeno creme brulee for dessert. Try to quiz them on picking out scents in wine. Sigh when they don't care. Keep ordering more wine when they fall asleep on the booth. Complain to in-laws about how exhausting motherhood is. Have to you be home with a 6-year-old. Everyone else, order a walnut salad and then yell at your server for it having walnuts, because you're allergic. Yell at server because the top of the creme brulee's burnt. Inquire about the immigration status of the chef. Tip your server $40 immediately after telling her she doesn't look too bright. Tell her she'll get over it. Shove your server when he comes to warn you that your reservation on the table is officially past the previously agreed upon time. Scream that he isn't allowed to touch you back when he tries to disconnect your arm from his collar. Edit, these were all different people. I am a cocktail server at the huge pool of a 4-star hotel. A woman said in a monotone voice and without any eye contact, I lost my sunscreen. Find it. Ordering $150 caviar to go for their cat. Wait. Cats eat caviar? Have I been neglecting my kitty? Seriously though, that is ridiculous. I operated a premium chain restaurant in Canada. One day this Indian gentleman started coming in, at first by himself. On the first day he spent $200 on wine and tipped $1,000. The next day he did the same again. When we saw him the third time, I had servers fighting over him. Anyway, one evening he got drunk on wine and Brad the busboy made the mistake complimenting his watch. M.R.S. takes off his tag and gives it to Brad. The next morning M.R.S. comes back to get his car and asks if Brad is there. I say yes and go get him. Brad knows what's up and is removing the watch as he walks over to M.R.S. M.R.S. says, Brad, I'm really sorry I got drunk last night and gave you my watch. Brad is chuckling as he is removing the watch and says it's no problem and he was just holding the watch until M.R.S. returned. The next thing M.R.S. said, I could not believe, Brad, you don't understand. I'm sorry because it was very rude of me to give you a used gift. And at that moment M.R.S. pulled out a box with a brand new tag you were inside and handed it to Brad. Ordering the most expensive wine in the house, pouring 2 glasses, taking a sip, and sending it back knowing full well they are paying for it. To those folks I say thank you. Nothing makes employees happier than free, expensive booze. I worked at a nice restaurant in downtown Portland and one day a lady called to make a dinner reservation for a large group. But first she starts asking all these questions about security, we had none, and how I thought the staff and patrons would handle a celebrity dining there. Is there enough space to be private? They like to be private. Would it be okay if they brought their own security to stop people from taking pictures and such? Etc. But of course, she couldn't name names. I rolled my eyes, told her whatever they need to do, and booked the date and time. Yes, I was super curious who it would be, and stayed past my shift to see who walked through the doors when the big night came. The group arrived, and it was no one. Not one of us who worked there recognized a single member of their party. They sure acted like they were someone, but all we saw was a loud group of douchy looking 20-somethings. They actually did bring a bodyguard who stood in the corner with sunglasses on the whole time. The only attention they got from other diners was the occasional side eye because they were being such rude and obnoxious assholes. Shock of shocks, they treated our staff horribly and tipped even worse. We'll never know who that person thought they were. Edit, oh wow, I went to sleep and this blew up. This happened about 9 years ago, so a little before the YouTuber invasion I think, but maybe not. Just some punks who thought they were someone. For those of you asking about the autograt, that actually jogged a whole new memory. We did try to add 18% but the party threw a massive fit about that, complained about the service, which I'm sure was fine. It was a well-known place, and refused to pay it, so the manager took it off so as not to create a bigger scene. Left the server in tears. I think everyone just wanted to get them out by that point. I don't even work at that nice of a restaurant, but last month I got chewed out over the phone because some lady left her baby's actual silver spoon on the table, and we didn't know where it was, so obviously one of us had stolen it. Back when I did waitering, there was a woman and her friends at one of my tables. The woman asked for a can of Coca-Cola, just so we're clear. When I brought their drinks and gave the woman her Coke, she looked at me, and, in that typical rich bitch voice, said, "Excuse me, honey. I asked for Fanta, not Coke." So I apologized, wrote it onto my notepad, and went back to get her a can of Fanta. Brought it to her, and again, she turned to me and said I didn't ask for Fanta, I asked for cream soda. By this time, I was getting a bit annoyed, but went back and got her a cream soda anyway. And surely, when I returned to her table, she did the same thing again. I asked for Sprite. Should I call the manager? So, for the last time, I smiled and I went back to the kitchen and packed one can of each: Coke, cream soda, Fanta, Sprite, Pepsi and Sparberry soda, into a small plastic box and took it all to her and said, "Here you go, miss, take your pick." She looked offended and almost made a scene. She started lecturing me about how I'm incapable of getting the simplest order right and that she wants to talk to the restaurant's manager. I told her that I can call him, and that I'll show him all the soda types I wrote on my notepad that she asked for, and we can get his opinion on the matter. She turned and took her damn Sprite out of the plastic box and said just leave it. Her friends were silent throughout the whole ordeal and none of them gave me any issues further on. I didn't receive a tip, as expected, but I shrugged it off. Most customers were decent. Edit: waitering is a South African term, but I learned some better terms and ways of referring to that from you guys. Thanks you. I worked for a resort in the Seychelles for 4 years. I have hundreds of stories which would fit this post, but one that stands out was a very wealthy Canadian family who stayed at one of the private residences for a couple of weeks. They brought their own staff including 2 personal chefs, but also asked for a hotel chef to assist their team with prep and local ingredient knowledge. A chef I was friendly with was selected to spend the 2 weeks with them. One day, another member of their staff came down to one of the restaurants and purchased 2 bottles of wine for €11,000 plus each. Now we had far more expensive bottles on the list, but this was still a notable sale, and later that night, I asked my mate what they had cooked to accompany the wine. Turns out they had poured both bottles into the pot while making a coq au vin. Worked at a grocery store in uppity Gold Coast, Chicago when I was a teen. We sold soup for lunch, and when bagging them, we put it in a paper bag followed by a plastic bag to make sure it's secure. Lady buys a soup. I proceed to bag the soup and she says no, I'll just put it in my bag. I say, am you sure? Mind you, she has a Louis Vuitton bag that looks brand spanking new. 15 minutes later she comes in raging that she has minestrone all over her Louis Vuitton and demands to speak to the manager. SMH. I've got a pretty good one. I work at a luxury property in California, and we had the co-founder of a large payment processing company stay with us a while back. He only liked to sleep on his own bed, so when he woke up that morning, he paid a team to load his bed into a truck and have it delivered to our property. We then removed the bed in his luxury suite and set up his bed that his team had brought us. He only stayed with us one night and the process was done to send the bed back home the following day. It kind of blew my mind that he went through all that trouble, just so he could always sleep on his own bed. To each their own, I guess. My uncle works at a very upscale restaurant on a very well-to-do and desirable vacation island in the Atlantic Ocean. One of their regular customers is a billionaire oil guy. My uncle has told me He arrives on a yacht that tows a smaller yacht. The smaller yacht is still big enough to have a helicopter. He demands to have his dogs seated at the table and feeds them foie gras and expensive water. When he takes humans to eat, my uncle has never seen him with the same woman twice, and often it's a table of women. If he really liked the meal, he will go through the restaurant and, in front of everyone, peel off crisp 100s from a giant roll of money in his pocket and tip every service person whether they helped or not. One time the owner got a call from health inspectors saying they received a complaint that dogs were seen eating in the restaurant. All the owner did was speak the billionaire's name and the health inspector said, "Oh okay, bye." So I've played at a lot of these venues with rich clientele, but the one that takes the cake is the rich cockwaffle that comes and demands we play, insert pop song on the No. 10 billboard, because his little princess likes it. Now while we have taken requests before, what's difficult here is that my fellow colleagues and I, professional string musicians, are getting paid by the venue to play classical music that we have pre-agreed on and prepared. My colleagues and I do not know the melody nor harmony nor even the bloody key of generic pop song No. 7. Not even that, but we are not getting paid by you or your little princess, so we aren't gonna play it. Not that this makes us exactly loved by some of the venue's patrons. Worked in a fancy smancy lobster pound restaurant on the water where had a lot of outdoor seating. These very wealthy people come to eat and demand a table outside for dinner. Now it's just before sundown in the middle of summer in Maine and we're on the water, so mosquitoes are definitely not scarce. These people sit down, order a $200 bottle of wine, a massive lobster each and some appetizers. They seem to enjoy the meal up until the sun sets and the bugs come out. These people were not happy and complaining about it and the shitty restaurant not paying for mosquito spraying. The waitress gets a couple candles to light and asks if they need anything else, and those mother duckers asked her to stand next to them with a flesweater. She laughed thinking they were joking, and the man said whatever happened to good service nowadays. They also left zero tip on a $350 bill. Late to this party, but I have a positive one to throw in amidst all the negative. I'm loosely acquainted with someone who is obscenely rich. He dated my best friend for a while back when we were in college. As you can imagine, he bought her fancy things all the time, took her on expensive family vacations with his folks, act. He was a stereotypical rich kid, but he was also kind and still very down to earth. They dated about a year, and in the spring we went spring breaking in his family's condo at a famous spring break beach location, and there was just me, my best friend, him and a couple of his friends. The group decided we wanted good old-fashioned Waffle House breakfast after a night of revelry. After eating, I noticed he was lingering behind the group. He'd said he had to take a leak, but he stopped back by the table on his way out to the car. Curious, I ran back to the restrooms just so I could pass by the table to see what he'd done. He left the waitress a small pile of Benjamins as a tip. Had to be $400 or $500. I couldn't quite tell because they were folded and rumpled from being in his wallet. My mouth fell open when I saw it, and I forgot I was even heading to the restroom. I looked out by the car and he was watching me through the glass windows, held up his finger to his lips mouthing, "SHHHH," and beckoned me back out to the car. I didn't tell, but my eyes were glued to the table as we pulled away in his car. The waitress collapsed into the seat of the table when she saw it. Pretty sure she was crying. Letting that guy get away was the dumbest thing my best friend ever did in her life. I play poker for a living, and every now and then some rich guy will sit down and start going all in every hand for $300, $500 without looking at his cards. One day I was in a game where a guy was betting $1,000, $3,000 without looking at his cards. It was insane to me, but for him I guess it wasn't that much money. Not working there, but saw someone claiming he can fire the waitress cause he has the power. My father was the manager of a very upscale restaurant for a short while. I'd use his discount for dates. Hey, broke college kid that only had that one trick up my sleeve to impress the ladies. Was there for a date, and a guy I had never seen before was shouting at the waitress that she needed to learn her job because he was friends with the manager there and would get her fired because he could. I asked our waiter if he could get my father. He came out, and while we were talking I suggested he should see his friend at the next table. He looked around and asked what table I was referring to. He didn't see anyone he knew there. Guy shut up and ate, paid and left. Don't work at any high class restaurants or hotels, but I currently live in an old yet nice and comfy apartment in Giza, around 20 minutes from the Pyramids complex. The landlady is a very nice old lady, probably in her 60s, and is filthy rich. Last year my car had to be repaired after a minor crash for more than a week, and when the landlady found out from the doorman about my situation, she sent one of her English-speaking maids to give me car keys for a BMW 520i, Mercedes-Benz S600, and a brand new Land Cruiser. The madam insists you use her car until yours is repaired. I was shocked, of course, and asked her if she still could go around with her lending this much cars to me. No worry, madam has 12 cars in Al Kahira. Okay, I guess. I ended up only using the Land Cruiser because it's the cheapest one, I think. Another story is when she knew I would graduate from college soon. She asked me to come visit her place. I did as she asked, and she just gave me a set of keys and some money. Here, I have nice villa in Ain Sokna. Go visit it with friend and family. Food and drinks is on me. I have maids and cooks there. Car, you can use mine. The money is for fuel. Happy graduation. I told her that I just couldn't take it, but she just shooed me away and told me to return her keys only after I really visited the villa. Haven't gone to the place yet, but I will soon enough when I have time. Ridiculous, yeah, but in a really good way. I worked at a restaurant in the lobby of a rather nice hotel. There was a rich dude that basically lived there. He would eat in our restaurant every night. Our chef had to hand pick his steaks from a local butcher. The steaks were ducking massive. It was always specially prepared just for him. Every ducking time this fuckstin would take 2 or 3 bites and complain to everyone in earshot that his steak was terrible. Every ducking time. This dude was odd. He would only drink our cheap wine that we served by the glass. However, he would request that you open a fresh bottle just for him. He couldn't possibly drink a glass of wine out of a bottle that was first opened for someone else. Even if I just opened the wine and poured a glass to the person next to him, that bottle was considered tainted to him. If you are that ducking picky, just buy your own damn bottle of wine. Victor, duck you. Oh, and one last thing. He parked in the handicapped spot out front, even though he is not handicapped. But because he spent so much damn money at the hotel, the managers refused to make him move his car or have it towed. Worked at a Hilton for a little while. Made about a dime above minimum wage cleaning bathrooms, walkways, polishing brass handrails, etc. I walked around with an obvious cleaning cart and was not service staff. Once, about 2 AM, this obscenely rich family barged in fighting with each other, generally being asses, and their airport shuttle driver was hauling in case after case of luggage. Poor guy. The matriarch of the family snapped me over, pushing a custodial cart, and threw a $50 bill at me, and barked to have the luggage brought to their room. Then they laughed at me for bending over to pick up $50 and laid the rich attitude on thick. I went, yes ma'am, I sure will, wheeled my cart away $50 in the black, and took a nap in the way back of the laundry room behind the machines. Oh man, it was so warm and noisy you could sleep off a nuclear bomb. I miss that spot. The family wanted my head when their luggage was still in the lobby the next morning. Fortunately I was so anonymous and unworthy of their attention they couldn't describe me, and the camera worker in security was too hungover to give a shit. For all the shit I got away with, though, that job sucked. The worst was that the place hosted child pageants. I've never seen such a group of vicariously entitled behavior. Yuck. I interviewed at a large hotel attached to a casino, and while I was being shown around the front desk, a woman walked up, said nothing, and got room keys after being greeted by the front desk agent. She immediately turned and walked away. Then the manager who was interviewing turned to me and said, "That's MRS. Recladipants. You never ask her for her name, her ID, or God forbid a credit card. She stays here camped once or twice a week because her husband spends so much in the casino. If you upset her, she will yell at you and then hand the person working next to you a $100 bill just to spite you. I ended up turning down a job there. Thankfully so, because apparently she wasn't the only guest of her type there. I work at a Marriott, one that is more expensive than your typical hotel but by no means a place that millionaires or celebrities would come to, especially because of our suburban location. However, that doesn't mean I don't often get people who think that because they are paying $150 a night on a Marriott hotel room, honestly not that much but it feels a lot to them, that they can be just as rude and entitled as the other comments on our thread. My favorite little story is the guy who was shooting hoops at our sports court too early in the morning, and when I asked him to stop he just looked at me and threw the ball as far as he could into the parking lot, saying I'm paying too much to be treated this way. I'm talking to your manager. This is more in the vein of a rich douchebag stereotype, but my dad used to work as a valet for lorries in downtown Chicago. Some pretty well-known football player came in about 15 minutes before closing with a group of friends. He made them reopen the kitchen so they could all have steaks. Then they stayed for almost 2 hours after close, being really loud and obnoxious and rude to most of the staff. He also tipped everyone horribly, especially considering everyone had to stay later because of him. In contrast to this guy, there was another NFL player that came in that was not as famous. He was extremely kind to everyone and tipped amazingly. He didn't drive there, so there was no car for my dad to get, but he asked my dad if he could hail him a cab, and when he did he gave him $100 just for that. A young man I'll call business douche tried to send back 2 bottles of Penfolds Grange, not because of the taste, but because he was trying to impress older potential clients with his stunning wine knowledge. Yeah, right. The potential clients were so grossed out by the display that they paid for the meal and insisted on paying for both bottles and drinking them. Business douche tried to reach for a bottle to pour himself a glass, and the client told him that since it wasn't up to his standards he couldn't possibly let him have any. Effective business shaming 101. It was like watching Jack Donaghy at work. I once stayed in a hotel an NFL team had rented for an away game. It was a really nice hotel and the only reason I was there was for a family member's wedding, and I was sleeping on a couch in a room. The whole place was filled with very wealthy people, and to separate them from the other guests they rented the 3 top floors and had security to stop anyone from getting to the floors. Best part about the trip was seeing a guy valet park a rented muscle car by just stepping out and handing the keys to the nearest person. Strange thing happened to me the other day. I was in a supermarket, Tesco in the UK, grabbing some food to cook for the next day with a friend. I had left my wallet at home on purpose to avoid trying to eat unhealthy outside of my house. I'm in the queue, raw chicken in my hand, and I notice I've ducked up. I've left my wallet at home. Luckily my friend was with me in the queue, and before I can say anything else he says, "Don't worry, I got you." Some random suave looking dude in front of us, in his 40s or 50s, turns to us and says, "No guys, don't worry, I got you." We think he's joking, so proceed to laugh and continue talking amongst ourselves. The suave dude instructed an assistant to grab him 2 packets of cigarettes and scan our stuff to at the self-checkout. We were confused at this point. He was being serious about buying our stuff. We wholeheartedly tried to reject his offer. In the end he kept insisting, so we allowed him to pay for both of our shops. Whilst the assistant scanned our food, we entertained small talk with him. He didn't seem to care much about our questions. He didn't tell us where he was from when I asked, but asked us a ton of questions and joked around. He then proceeds to pay for the total shop, approximately £30. He puts in a £50 note, and of the £20 change returned to him, he gives £5 to the assistant and tells us to keep the change, probably feeling bad because we're poor students. The strange thing about that encounter that has stayed with me is, he probably will have no recollection of what happened in a couple of months. It'll be something he's completely forgotten about. He genuinely did that out of the good in his heart. There was nothing to gain for him. But the memory stays with me, and although he's most likely forgotten, it's something I'll never forget. Once saw a Wolf of Wall Street type character trying to impress his flock of sheep in an expensive bar. He approaches the server and abruptly orders a round of expensive whiskers. He then pulls a wad of $100 bills out and extends his arm to her, saying take some, peasant, the whole time refusing to look at her, instead looking at his friends for approval. She swiftly smashed the entire wad out of his hand, and I took great pleasure in his angry reaction while he scrambled to pick up the cash in a crowded bar. There's a thing in Stockholm's rich kid district called Vaska. Basically, you order an expensive bottle of champagne, pay for it and watch how the waiter wastes all of it by pouring it down the drain. Some places let you do it yourself. Sadly, it's an established thing in these kinda circles, like, it's on the menu cards and all that. Honestly, the dumbest way of flexing I've ever witnessed. I used to work in a luxury hotel. A colleague of mine got a call from an in-house guest, asking for a car to take him somewhere. Naturally, he offered him what options we had, and the guest got annoyed and closed the line. A few minutes later, the guest came down to the front desk and asked for my colleague. He then proceeded to show him a cardboard bag literally overflowing with cash, and started saying, "You dare ask me which car just because of different prices? Can't you see how much money I have? Why do I care? Just get me a ducking car ready, people." I was in Amsterdam to judge the Cannabis Cup years ago, with about 30 people that had all expenses paid by this one rich dude that owned race cars we all worked on. We all were trying to go to lunch one day, when we came across a steakhouse. It was packed. They said we wouldn't be able to all fit 4 hours. The rich guy, without even hesitating, asked, "Can we smoke in here?" They replied that there was absolutely no smoking in the restaurant, as is most of Amsterdam, outside of coffee shops. He asked for the manager. When they came over, he said, "How much will it be to empty the restaurant?" The manager looked confused. Rich dude repeats, "I want to know how much money you want to get everyone out of here, so my friends and I can have lunch and smoke." I think the manager made a phone call or something, came back, spoke with the rich dude, and said to wait a minute. We had to wait about 15 minutes, but slowly, everyone began leaving with to-go boxes, and had surprised looks on their faces, because they weren't paying their checks. We ended up pulling together a bunch of tables and ordering a ton of food, while everyone smoked weed up. I barely even got to eat, because I was the only one that could roll worth a sheet, so I probably rolled like 15-20 blunts, while waiters came around to check on us. It was really surreal. I think the restaurant told their customers that there was an issue and they had to close, but their meals would be comped. In reality, they were all added to my friend's bill. I don't even want to know how much he spent, just for lunch that day. At the time, it was a place I couldn't even afford going to, on my own. This guy pays everyone to leave, pays the manager to shut the doors, pays to let us smoke weed up in a place that doesn't allow smoking weed up. At first the waiters and staff seemed really pissed, but he would tip them like $100 every time they would refill his water or whatever, so they were soon having a great time. It was the most ultimate flex move I'd ever seen. Edit, had the wrong restaurant name. This was not stereotypical but ridiculous it was. I had a customer come in the most basic cheap clothes, pull out a bundle of $2,000 in cash, buy a glass of our most expensive wine, sit by himself for about an hour not doing anything, then leaving having taken only 1 or 2 sips. Not a restaurant hotel worker. However, we were living in the Bahamas for a few months, and to occupy her time my mother volunteered at the school. This got the attention of a rich person. She invited us to Windermere Island. This is the kind of gated area where royalty have estates and you do not get to visit. The experience was surreal. We realized we weren't invited to chat, we were summoned to listen and entertain this bored housewife of a Texas oil tycoon. She had no interest in us, just talking about how she thought these kids should be helped. She never came to the school. We spent a couple hours there as this lady rambled on with the most twisted thought process. Not crazy, just twisted by circumstance. Like a bird in a gilded cage. Then we were dismissed. Worked at a private villa in Bali. One guest stood out. She only drinks and bathes in Evian. So one day I spent almost an hour filling a large tub from tons of Evian bottles. The same young woman complained that the path from her villa gate to her room wasn't well lit as she wore sunglasses at night. Edit. Thank you for the silver. There was this classic trick I used to do when seating people. If, based on the logistics, I needed someone to sit at a table I knew was the least desirable one, close to the toilet, entrance etc., I would always make it look like it's reserved for VIP clients or in case the boss decides to come in to eat. Pretentious rich people want the opportunity to be seated somewhere special so badly that they never ask questions and go for it right away. It made my job a billion times easier back then. So, not a restaurant or a hotel, but a travel agent. Client is a big dig. Client can't drive and crashes car. Client walks out of police station after filling out all paperwork following the crash and decides to commandeer the first helicopter he sees to get him where he wants to go. Because rich people logic. Footnote. There was a pilot to go with the helicopter, to eliminate any confusion on that count. Client definitely would not be able to manage a helicopter on his own. Hell, he couldn't even manage his own travel plans. I worked at a luxury vacation rental property in a small, affluent mountain town. You can probably narrow it down to a couple places already. Being a vacation rental meant we provided hotel-like services to guests on behalf of the owners. These were full ownership condos, not timeshare. One person owned it, in some cases owned several, with an average value of about $2 million for a one-bedroom unit. I only say this to beat down stereotypes and make a point. Wait for it, though, there's a story coming, as most of our owners were actually relatively down-to-earth and kind people who made their money through a lot of hard work. I got to know some of them, yes, a few were heiresses, but many more were self-made business people or executives in major corporations. I worked in the film industry previously, and one of the same rules apply there. The shittiest people are the ones who have ego issues, the ones who want to be hot sheet, but no they aren't, but are rubbing elbows with those are truly successful. Onto the story. There was a tradition at our property that we put out warm cookies near the time the lifts close. We only made a certain number each day. Those that waited around or made it a point to get them always got one. And often we'd make another batch if enough demand was there. There's some days we'd just give them away to neighboring businesses stuff because so many would be left. You never really knew, but did your best. Well, one day a lady and her daughter come looking for the cookies an hour after they were put out. They had been gone about 50 minutes now. She asked about the cookies, and I explained those are put out at a certain time, and was literally opening my mouth to offer to make one specially for her daughter, but before I could exhale a word, she launched into a tirade. So my daughter doesn't get one? Are you for real? You're a joke. You're worthless, your job is worthless, and you shouldn't be working here. You are a ducking piece of shit. All this in front of her young daughter, no less. In spite of this, I smiled and offered to make one for her daughter, as I had originally intended to offer. She repeated how worthless I was and how I should never bother showing up to work again, and stormed off. I didn't say a word to her the rest of her stay. In college I dated a college student who was the daughter of the Sony America division president. We are at some fancy restaurant in Boston. This was 20 plus years ago, so I don't remember the name of it. We are eating our dinner next to us just when a dude seated next to us gets on his hands and knees and proposes to his girlfriend. Girl said yes. My girlfriend congratulates them and as an engagement gift writes them a check for $10,000. A couple weeks later I ask her if that check was ever cashed. She literally forgot about it. A quick phone call to her financial manager. Yes, she had one of those, confirmed it was indeed cashed. She shrugged it off like it was no big deal and proceeded along like nothing happened. Not a specific event, but we constantly had people stay who would make a big mess and then happily say just charge it to my card when they booked out. Didn't matter what it was, food or drink, blood, vomit, trash, burn marks. They didn't care how inconvenient or gross it was. They could pay their way out without guilt. The worst one was a busload of Asian business people, a fairly common type of customer at the villas I cleaned. who left the place trashed and full of empty alcohol bottles, broken wine glasses, blood, cigar smoke, and 6 wax. We had to shut the main building they used down for days after the left. And again, just charge it to the card. I work in a 5-star hotel in Germany. We had guests that checked in and we're given an upgraded suite for New Year's Eve in a special section of the hotel. They complained when they realized they would have to walk 2 minutes to the New Year's Eve party. Then they complained that the suite wasn't good enough to be a suite and insisted they be placed in a deluxe suite closer to the party. We had literally no rooms available. They were extremely rude and pompous to every employee. It was a nightmare for management. They spent 30 minutes arguing before finally saying fine and keeping their rooms. Used to be a bartender, had 4 guys walk up to the bar and order 4 shots of Remy Martin Louise XIE, which was $435 a 1.5 ounce pour. It's normally poured into a snifter and a discerning drinker will usually dilute it down slightly because it's between 40 and 100 years aged and is like 55% alcohol by volume. These 4-ish wankers didn't know any of that and wanted it in shot glasses. And they proceeded to throw back $1,700 worth of the finest cognac you'll ever taste. They tipped me $300 so I forgave them quickly, but that was such a rich person thing to do. One of my favorite situations was when my wife and I were staying on the Big Island in Hawaii. There was an expensive all-inclusive resort. We could only afford the bed and breakfast variant, even splurging for our honeymoon. A large family showed up after a few days and the one father was obnoxiously loud at the communal breakfast. They were kind of bragging about their wealth and making it clear that they thought they were a big deal bringing a large family to an extremely expensive resort. It was obnoxious as everyone there was probably very wealthy, but also it was ruining the quiet outside breakfast next to the Hawaiian beach. There is a happy ending, though, as there was one guest who sat with his family quietly, but had a very specific eating regimen and was high profile enough that the head chef came out to make sure that he was taken care of, Steve Jobs. So while the obnoxious jackass was being loud and everything, Steve Jobs and the chef walk by and I watch as the loud guy slowly realizes that even with his millions or tens of millions, he's not Steve Jobs. I've met 2 celebrities through my various work experiences. Tom Allen requested that we close the small bakery that I worked at for him while he is dining there. We did. He didn't leave a tip. Later in my career I met Mario Batali, famous Food Network chef, and he was the most normal person ever. He took a class with us, and then proceeded to pay for everyone else's class that was in his group and bought lunch for the staff as well. I guess both are stereotypical rich person things, for vastly different reasons. Capital I. This one dude literally landed a helicopter in the back of the hotel I worked at. Kinda just forgot about it until I was taking him room service and dude opens the door with like 5 model looking women all having a topless pillow fight. I see him later at dinner and ask me for like an ounce of the best weed I could find and he would pay me triple what I got it for. Fun dude. Even when he checked out, my friend was one of the housekeepers and found like an 8-ball of coke left on the dresser. We had a fun closing shift with the cooks that night. Oh man, this 4-top came into the restaurant I worked at, no. One in the state, consistently, spent a ton of money, tipped 50% on the bill, and then the guy who signed the check proceeded to leave a $300 Cartier pen in the book. I ran out to the valet stand to return it and he laughed and said keep it. I was also given a bag of about $500 in just flown in Bolivian cocaine. Purest I'd ever do as part of a tip after I cut up straws for a table to snort with. They were doing blow right in front of the entrance to the service station, where all the staff and most of the guests could see them. Last favorite was a time when a 4-top ordered a last course sushi restaurant of $400 in Live Uni, Urchin, ate 1 piece of each, and then said they were full and left the rest. One of the few times I've seen waitstaff unapologetically smash on someone's leftovers. My mum used to work in a snazzy hotel in Dublin. Mel Gibson stayed while filming Braveheart. He insisted that under no circumstances was anyone to ask for his autograph, and everyone was informed. except one girl who on the Monday came in from sick leave. As soon as she saw the star she said, "Hello Mr. Gibson, may I have your autograph?" Well, he went into orbit, demanding that she be fired, not reprimanded, fired. His was a real big dig. I hope he's changed. I didn't work in high-class restaurant. I delivered for Jimmy John's. However, my delivery radius included a very wealthy area. Most of the stories here are about rich people being excessive with money. However, my experience has been that the rich are often incredibly stingy and assholes, and the worst tippers. A man called in an order at 9:57 p.m. when our store closed at 10. I knew that delivery was going to keep me in the store an extra half hour to 45 minutes than usual, time which I would not be paid for, which is a different story. And yes, I realize this is illegal, but it was my first job and it was being done behind my back. This story happened right after I found out, but before I had the gonads to talk to my manager about it, so I deliver his sandwich, and apparently when I delivered I wasn't as friendly as he thought I should have been. I said Jimmy John's delivery instead of my usual "Hi there, I've got a Jimmy John's delivery for you." He had paid via credit card using the app, so his tip was already included in the bill. He was so incensed at awful and rude behavior that he called the store, making me stand there and wait while he did it, and demanded that my manager refund the payment, saying that he would pay in cash instead. My manager was generally pretty laid back, so he just went along with it despite it being an unorthodox request. The man then paid me in cash with exact change, thereby denying me my tip, all because I wasn't as friendly as I should have been. I won't name him, but he's a well-known billionaire in my hometown. The tip, of course, was 47 cents, enough to bring his bill to an even dollar amount. He later left not one but two one-star reviews of my store using two false accounts. They were both left the day after the delivery, and referenced my manager, my name, and me as the delivery boy. At least, I'm assuming it was him, since neither I nor my manager had had any other angry customers recently.